We're live. Let me make sure that we're up and running.
Yeah, no worries.
Let me see. Roll this out in just a second, everybody. Let everybody get in. Got an exciting show here.
I was going to talk about body stuff, but I'd like to start with talking about enemies and allies, if that's okay.
Hey, this is a platform for you, so whatever you want to talk about is fine with me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it leads up to the body stuff, but without understanding the potentials of things, it's important.
Yeah. All right. Test. Okay, we're good there. All right. Let me do a little roll call. Aline's in the house from Norway. Jenna Harmon, Sydney, Australia. Nasia. Let's see. Debriel. Kersey Anaron. Yusuf Khan, my brother. Laurel Gay. Thank you, Laurel, for all your continued love, support, and contributions. Debbie Rose Marie. Kate Amerigo. Joan Kirkendall. Yvanya's in the house from Tasmania. Doreen Kinney, thank you for your love and support and contributions. Tyson's in the house. Kim Atkins, all right. Kim Atkins says, great interview last time. It's always a conversation here. Hello, Cheryl Cody, Kelly Bird, Jennifer Ernest. We got 36 people in the house, and they're coming in fast. So let's get right down to it, because if anyone saw the first conversation that we had, Jason likes to get straight to the point, and that's really, that's really the new 5D plus way, just to be direct. And we come forth today with our highest unconditional love and purest intentions for the betterment and good of all. And this is Soul Speaks 5D, Todd Medina. This is the Soulgy Network, and we're privileged, honored to have Jason Estes with us again today. So without further ado, welcome to the show again, Jason. I love collaborating with you, and thank you for honoring us with your presence.
Thank you. I just want to say first, wow, so many people have reached out to me, and I've read and responded to each one of them, and just your stories were very, very amazing, and your gratitude, I felt it very deeply. So I just want to say thank you to all of those people who took the time to reach out and tell me their personal story and how my interview or conversation rather helps shape and unlock doors for you. That was really just wow. I'm blown away still that many people reached out and spoke to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
And now for what I wanted to talk about, we are going to talk about Body as a Child. It is going to happen this time, I promise, guys. But first, we're going to pre-reference that with enemies and allies and understanding that. So do you want me to just go ahead and start?
Yeah, go right into it, and
okay,
we'll
cool.
just see where it goes.
So enemies and allies is one of the most important concepts you'll learn as a fifth dimensional being and processing into the higher dimensions from 4 to 5 and greater, all the way up to 13. So enemies and allies is this, basically. An enemy is anything lower than your current status. So if you have an outdated contract, it can be an enemy because it's outdated, right? It's beyond something that helps you. So your job as a spiritual explorer is to bring all of those up into you and to transmute them into something greater, which then turns them into allies. Now, this happens with every decision, every action, every choice that you make. And this is why this is such an important concept, is right now I have an ally of this liquid right here in front of me to keep me hydrated, right? But it doesn't mean that I have to drink it. It means that it's there in front of me. So the potential of it exists. And what's important about that is as long as I have the potential, I have the ally. So when I don't have the potential, I don't have the ally anymore. And this leads into a very big problem. So let's talk about not having fluid. Well, if my body doesn't have access to it, every second that I have to take to go get it is a second longer than I need to take. Does that mean that I need to drink this all right now? No, because that would be unhealthy to my body. But my body's able to pull the codes and frequencies from this to learn from it what it needs to learn without me actually drinking it. And that's the ally of the fluid. The actuality of the fluid is when I drink it, it hydrates me. It also has different minerals and supplements inside of it, so it helps to establish a higher current inside my body. Any questions so far around that concept?
Very good analogy. Keep going.
Okay, cool. So enemies can also be choices. So let's say that you know that you shouldn't do something, but you do it anyway. Well, you've just created an enemy. because now you have created a choice that wasn't for you to choose, and you've stepped yourself a little bit further from fate. Now, this is an important process to understand as well, because the strongest ally you will ever have is your fate. The weakest ally you will ever have is going against your fate. So if you choose to go against your fate, you're creating something called an extreme. And there's only one way to balance extremes, only one way that I know of, and I have studied and worked very hard on this in the ethers, and it's forgiveness. So the cool part about forgiveness is it's free. If you screw up, just forgive yourself. If someone screws up with you, just forgive yourself and then forgive them, because you created that experience, right? So enemies are easy to fix. They just require forgiveness. Now, I know it's easier said than done, because forgiving yourself is probably one of the hardest things you'll ever do in this life. But as you get good at understanding forgiveness, you will no longer need it. Because to balance all of your extremes is to slowly begin to play in a slow and steady race. You begin to win, and you begin to win more and more and more and more. And one thing I like to say is that every 3 small steps is a big step. So celebrate the small steps just like you celebrate the big steps. And here's a good thing. Every celebration is an ally, because you're creating a positive momentum for you and your worth and moving in more value. And that's this process of understanding enemies and allies. So now how that applies to the body as a child is where we come into a little bit of conversation that confuses some people. So if you get confused or anything like that, or anyone else asks questions, please ask them. Okay?
We got that.
All right, cool. So the body as a child. You are, as the spiritual being, the adult in the relationship. Your child, as your body, is basically the child in the relationship. So the challenge then comes into, how do I teach the child? And any parents out there know that you can't teach the child through control. It will just rebel and do the opposite. So the trick isn't to teach the child through control, but through expression, through that communication of, hey, okay, so I know you want this. So let's just take an example. Let's say that you want to eat a giant piece of cake. Okay, body wants a giant piece of cake. You as a spiritual being know that that giant piece of cake may or may not be good for you. So you have a chat with the child and you say, okay, here's what can happen if we eat this cake. Here's what can happen if we don't eat this cake. What do you want to explore? Because your child is exploring and growing. And this is why moving into where we are with the last interview, or the last conversation, was alchemy. Because now we are in an alchemist state as a body and as a spiritual being, and we're beginning to have those conversations. So the body as a child is simply the acknowledgement that the child doesn't always know best, and you don't always know best as the adult, but you know better most times. So it doesn't mean you don't eat the cake. It means you have the discussion of eating the cake. And then sometimes your body might be like, well, you know what? Listening to that, it actually doesn't feel like I need to eat the cake anymore, because you had the ally of the cake. Now, just for the record, I'm not knocking cake. I love cake. It's one of my favorite things. I just want to state this as an example because it's easy to understand.
No, it's a good analogy, and I love it, because also it's a great example of what you were talking to me and Morgan about yesterday, which was your whole approach in your mission is not to tell anybody anything, but to leave them a choice.
Yes. Yeah. My definition of wayfarer is someone who shows a choice where there wasn't one before. And that's it. After the choice is shown, you just walk away. Say, okay, hey, you have the choice. Whatever you choose to do with it, that's up to you. And you don't apply pressure. You don't try to do anything else, because once the choice is known, then anything after that is you trying to control the situation, or you trying to know better for someone else. Yeah. And I said yesterday that the greatest thing that I've learned in my life is this. I'm the only one that's not perfect until someone tells me otherwise. So until someone comes to me with a challenge or a problem, I'm going to be working on me. And that's why I spend most of my days working on me. And then when I'm ready, I go out into the world, and usually people come to me, and then I can assist them. But that's, again, the strongest ally you'll ever have is yourself. Yeah. And the higher versions of yourself as allies are one of the greatest things ever. Anything outside of yourself, again, you're taking yourself away from you. So you're not getting to get that full download, because we have to be centered in that space.
Yusuf says, children cry for their needs. Should we cry for our needs to get what we have manifest? I
have a really cool approach to that as well. What I believe is this: ask once and then live. Because if you don't have what you want, then you're not necessarily worthy for it yet. but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be worthy for it in the future. And this is where I differ a lot with a lot of the modern New Age movement. Is they basically say you should attract things. You should take your energy and create this board or all these things and like put your energy on these things. Well, put your energy on this and those things come naturally. My whole life, what I've done is I don't advertise. I just talk to people and I do good and I am good and I work very hard to have faith every day. And what works for me is that concept is be good, do good, have faith. And those of you who read the note understand that like it's not an easy thing to do, but living that way attracts everything that's meant for you. Whenever you put your energy on things, they may or may not be good for you. An example I like to say with the law of attraction and that particular thing is if I put all my energy on this red car, right? Well, I want this red car. It has to be this red car. And then all of a sudden a blue car appears. I'm going to be upset because I got this blue car, but it's still a car, right? It's just that the universe said that blue car was actually better for me than the red car. And I don't know why the universe says the red car is not good for me, but let's just say that I did. Let's say that 5 days from now, I drive the red car, and because it's red, it attracts more attention, and a police officer pulls me over, and I get a ticket. Well, now I can't afford to eat because I broke the bank buying the car, right? And I don't know these things. But if I try to attract a certain thing so strongly, then it doesn't matter what's good for me anymore. And this leads to all kinds of problems and handicaps that lead us astray, basically. So I'm not saying the law of attraction is bad. Just ask once and live your life. And then if it comes up again, ask again and live your life. Don't focus on things you don't have. Focus on what you do have and learn to master those. And I promise you, your life will continue to elevate up.
Yeah. I love what you said too, because from a frequency standpoint, you know, and the way you started the show with talking about allies and enemies as a frequency or an energy, if we make that vision board, or if we put that out there and focus on that, you know, I guess in my mind becomes your enemy if you're too attached to it. You just have to let it go. What I love about what you said too is that you spend all your time working on you before you go out and do what you got to do. I think people might be interested in knowing how Jason works on himself every day. What does that look like?
Well, what I like to do is interface with my divinity, which means the highest version of me outside of time and space. And I basically just work on connecting with it and learning from it so that I can get what I need to get through it. And that for me looks like writing technology for others. That looks like writing coursework and then taking the courses myself. So I create this template outside of reality, and then I begin to merge that template into reality. And as I'm overlaying that, I'm able to see all of the issues I have. I wrote a technology called leadership, where I took every leader who ever existed in all of the dimensions and I overlaid it on top of me. And I will tell you, that was the hardest thing I ever did. I cried multiple times. I was just like, this is impossible. I'm such a failure. Because I took this giant version of like all the greatest leaders and put it on top of me to see like where I needed to work on myself. And I mean, I think that's probably one of the greatest things you can do when you get to that level of the Grand Alchemist, is understanding how to take things that have been and overlay them to learn through them and to grow into them. But at the same time, it takes a high constitution, because you have to know what you don't know, and you have to be okay with that. And that again is a strong ally. When you are truly able to say, I know that I'm good at this and I know that I'm bad at this, then you are ready to really play. Because when you know you're bad at something, you can work on it. But until then, you won't listen to anyone. You don't care what anyone has to say. And it's a challenge. So the strongest ally that you can have with yourself is working with the highest version of yourself, right? Not the higher version of yourself, because that doesn't mean much, but the highest version of yourself. And try to do it outside of time and space, because the highest version of you inside of time and space is usually 3 days old.
Wow. Yeah, I've always had an issue with that higher self versus highest self. Now you brought some clarity to that. Susanna McKinnon says, if we are trying to attract things, are we coming from a place of lack rather than a place of the universe already meets our needs?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. But again, trying to attract and asking for, very different things. Trying to attract means that I am going out of my way to reach for something, right? So now I am out of my way. Well, what I was actually supposed to get just went past me. So that doesn't help anyone, because now it's going to take 3 days to 6 months for it to loop back around. And during that time, I'm outside of fate. So I have created the greatest enemy there is. And that's a very challenging thing to overcome. You have to forgive yourself, right? It's like, oh, I missed this thing. It's going to come back around. I just need to work on me. So I forgive myself, and now I'm ready to work on me again. And then eventually that thing will come back, and hopefully you'll be ready for it that next time.
Yeah. And it sounds like to me what you're saying too is that when you're interfacing with your highest self, it in that moment, so to speak, it knows everything.
Yes.
It knows everything, whatever's discussed, whatever your dreams are, whatever your desire is, and all that. And then you go out and you work on yourself, and you don't really have to think about how all the pieces come into place. Would that be
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly how it works. There's a challenge there, though, because connecting with your highest self and then not going out into the world is what a lot of people do. I call that spiritual escapism. It's not
Yeah.
helpful, because
Yeah.
if I work on myself forever, but I sit in a cave and I never go out into the world, I'm helping the collective by creating a template. This is true, and it's very beneficial. So I'm not knocking people that do this, but you're not going to learn and get the wisdom necessary. You're going to get knowledge, because knowledge and wisdom are different. Knowledge is untested, wisdom is earned and created. And our job, as what we're coming into as alchemists, is to become wise, not to become knowledgeable. Books
Yeah.
and everything will get you so high, but you also take greater falls from that. It's better to go out into the world and learn by living than it is to sit in your office or your room and read books for like 20 hours straight and never interface with the world. And
Yeah.
the challenge with like social media and these things that we have now is that we've moved away from going out into the world and learning. We're now just feeding ourselves with like YouTube videos and all this other stuff, but not really applying it out in the world. And it leads to this disconnect of what we're here to do. And we're here to have fun. We're here to play. We're here to explore. We're not here to stare at a screen for hours and hours and hours and hours, hoping that people will find us. We got to go out there. We've got to go touch the earth. We've got to learn as we live. Because if we don't do that, then what was the point of coming?
Yeah. Yeah, because that knowledge, and I think I can remember a couple of past lives where I had a bald head and wore a robe and was in a cave. But no, I'm just making a joke. But that knowledge is one thing, but it's that action that converts it to wisdom.
Yes.
And that's what's to me inspiring, is that like you said, we're here to enjoy, we're here to thrive and live. So when we take those steps out there, we're walking into the unknown, but that's the beautiful part of it. And I think that's probably the biggest fear we've had when you really get right
Absolutely.
down to it.
Yeah. And again, that's fear is important. Like, as I said before, it was in closing, so it was at the very end. But what's important is fear. Like, it gets a bad rap and everything, but it's a step in the process. So if you're holding that fear, then congratulate yourself. Don't go into like, wow, I'm such a pathetic person, all these things because I'm afraid. No, celebrate, because you've just found something that if you move
Yeah.
through it, you are going to learn more than you can imagine and grow in ways that just like change everything. Because fear as a resistance is a great thing. As long as you can move through it, it's that much more rewarding, especially because now you have grown into confidence over time through that experience. And whatever you just overcome with that fear helped a lot of other people. Maybe not right now, but later down the road. Because the next time that experience comes up for someone else, you'll have gone through it, and that will make it easier for them to hear you.
Yeah.
And that's what a teacher is.
Yeah.
A teacher is someone that can hold that space. It's not about the words, it's about the presence.
Yeah.
And if you've overcome a lot, you have a wise presence. That presence answers most questions. You don't even have to talk about stuff. You can just sit there and be like this in a room full of people, and they learn a lot. When I was younger, I used to do silent meditations. It was one of my favorite things that I would host. We would all just lay down on the floor and just be quiet and wouldn't talk for an entire hour. And people would just be like blown away because it'd be so quiet that you could hear the air conditioner unit running outside of my house. It was like amazing what we could do. And all we had to do was just be quiet and sit with each other. And I feel like that's where we're headed as a planet, is less from content and more into this space of I am everything I need, and I want to play with that with others.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're headed very soon, actually. But in order to get there, we have to have everything within ourselves. And that's again cultivating that child. So the body as a child is the first step, right? Then you get into what is called the body as the wounded child, because now you're going to deal with all the traumas and all the problems that have ever been created in this lifetime, and if you're doing it right, in all others. Because your body stores all that information inside of it. Every time that you think isn't a big deal, but you feel a little bit about it, your body thought it was a big deal. And it stored it. It said, okay, well, we're going to reference this again sometime. And it might not be this lifetime, but we will definitely get into this because you and your body had a disagreement, and it's going to hold on to it until it lets it go. So the body as a wounded child is the next phase. And a lot of people call this the dark night of the soul. There's all these ascension symptoms. They're like sick. They don't like it. Most people walk away from it at that point. But if you persevere and you push through this detoxification, what happens is your body becomes an awakened child. And that's the next step of the body as a child, right? It's this awakened child, which means it is curious, it is playful, you are curious, you are playful, and you begin to play together. And when that happens, magic happens. The world becomes miracles and rainbows. Like, you can't even begin to describe how awesome it is. But you have to push through the wounded child, right? Yeah. And then the final state is called the body as the divine child. And the divine child is an ascended form of the body. I'm not there yet. I've been working on it for years. It's just, I don't even know if I'll get there in this life. And that's okay, because it's a fun goal to have. But you have to be okay with where you are in the process. So many people want what the future holds. They want to compare themselves to some avatar who walked the earth and all these other things. And it doesn't help, because that being and you are different templates. So you can't ever become this. You just can't. And that's okay, because you're going to become something greater as you than this ever was. But the key is to work on you and be okay with it. And if you are going to compare yourself, which I don't recommend doing anyway, but if you are going to, compare yourself to a past version of you, not some distant like deity or anything like that. Simply yourself a few months ago, if you're going to compare. But again, it doesn't really help. Celebrate every day and forget yesterday. And when it comes up again for you to work on it. One of my biggest things that I teach my students is don't dig, because digging only takes you down. When you're digging, you're always going down. When you are meant to know something, it will show up right in front of you and you will know it. If you dig to try to find the problem, all of a sudden, you're now going to be lower than where you need to be, and things are going to go over you. So staying present is the key to everything. And the way you do that is just live. Live your life as best you can. Continue to work on yourself. And everything you've ever wanted will come to you naturally, organically. And that's the future of where we're headed and where we're going. So the body as a child and how to get through those phases is probably what most people are wondering right now. I mean, I know if I had heard myself, I'd be wondering that. So the body as a child is an acknowledgement. It's the first step. You say, okay, I am not my body. My body is a child and it needs me to grow. And I'm here to take care of it. And that's okay. And that's the first step. When you can acknowledge that, you'll start to understand what your body actually needs and wants. And that's a very big, big move. So now the next question is, for the older people, you guys have abused your bodies. I don't care who you are, you have. At some point in your life, you abused your body. I've done it. I've done it. So that's happened. Every time you abuse your body, you actually lose trust with your body. Your body doesn't trust you anymore. So the moment that you start to acknowledge, hey, you're a child, you're going to go through a grief, a sadness, all of these things are going to come up for you, because you're going to be like, wow, I treated my body really poorly. And then you think about it, and I can promise, for me, definitely, but for most of you too, that you treated your child very poorly. Like, you didn't take care of it certain times. There were certain times you forced it to do things. Like, you weren't necessarily the best parent, but you didn't know that you were a parent. So again, the first step is that forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself. If you don't forgive yourself, you can't move forward, and it can't move forward with you. When you forgive yourself and you prove to your body that you're worthy of being trusted, what happens is your body then begins to forgive you. And so these extremes of like having these Kundalini awakenings where you can't function for days, having all these ascension like symptoms come up like rashes, burns, your eyes stinging, all these things stop happening, because extremes only come where forgiveness is needed. So when your body goes through an experience, an extreme of something, it's because it's light pushing up against something that isn't forgiven. That's all it is. So when you find that symptom that comes up, be grateful. Don't get upset. Don't be like, this is so horrible, I'm going to keep focusing on it, because you're just going to make it worse. Instead, say, okay, I can acknowledge that there's something up for me right now that I am ready to forgive. I don't know what it is, but my child does. And if I have a conversation, I can come to the bottom of this, and we can come to this forgiveness, and we can grow together. So the next question then becomes, how do I build that trust with my body again? How do we rebuild this bridge? And if you have ever had a friend that betrayed you or hurt you, you know that trust is the hardest thing to get back, right? It's normal. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of this process. So your body doesn't trust you to start out with, and that's okay. You might not trust your body, and that's okay. But the key to that is proving to your body that you're trustworthy. So every time that you take the moment and the opportunity to step through fear, you actually gain trust with your body, and your body trusts you more. Every time that you walk into danger, you put yourself in a situation that your body didn't want you to go in because it was dangerous, you take away trust. So every moment is an opportunity to rebuild trust or to take away more trust. And that becomes this universal game that I like to call the infinite game, because your body and you are infinite beings, and you're learning to communicate at the deepest levels possible. And when you do get to that level where you can communicate with your body, miracles happen. The ability to run through electricity through your body to bless things changes everything. You can do anything you want to do at that point, because the more blocks you have, the less your ability to impact the world is. And the blocks are almost all in your body. You as the divine being are an infinite being, right? Like, you've already mastered everything. It's just your personality that's lensing it. So once you finally remove this personality aspect and you have the divine being, and then you have the divine child, everything's possible. But until you get there, it's not. And that's okay. Accept where you are on the journey and begin moving towards where you want to go. Don't accept where you are on the journey and continue to loop in circles forever.
Yeah, and I love too what you said about not getting to that point, which, I'm not going to bang on the new age, the new age verbiage or whatever, but it's ascending, it's expanding, not ascended. And I love what you said about, I love what you said about, getting to the point where you have the divine being and the divine child. That is motion. That's like the clear motion forward, with I hate to use the word control, but with giving up control and having that creative, magical control, that cosmic control that just takes care of itself.
Yep. When we surrender to the greatest value of ourselves, everything else takes care of itself. To get to that place where you can surrender to the greatest value of yourself, that's like your whole life right there. And you might get there, and that's amazing. But if you don't get there, you will eventually. So celebrate every moment that you're alive, because you've made it. And then I wanted to kind of touch, we still have a little bit of time, so I wanted to touch on one other thing, unless you have other questions around the body as a child.
I'm good. I think everybody's comments are saying thank you for explaining, and this is very clear. So I think everybody's getting it. You're doing a great job explaining it.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys. So the next step then is, now we're working on this. We know what we need to work on. So how do we get there? And I talked about tools and how there's like outdated technologies when you get to different dimensionalities. But the key is really just work with what works. When it doesn't work anymore, don't work with it. And this means letting go of fixed ideas. So Blink is always going to be good for me. No, that is not a true statement. No matter what it is, it doesn't matter if it's my technology, if it's Reiki, if it's, I don't know, a lot of other things out there. If it's anything out there, eventually it won't work. And that's just natural. Everything you're going to grow out of eventually if you're using it properly. And that's what a tool is for. A tool is to teach you something so that you can move forward, right? Well, everything on this planet is a tool. So food is a tool, drinking is a tool, cake is a tool, right? Everything out there is a tool. People are actually tools. And I get a lot of flack for this particular concept, but eventually you outgrow people if they don't continue to grow. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's not that you're better than them or they're better than you. It's just that you guys have made choices that separate you. And there's nothing wrong with that. You learned what you needed to learn. be grateful for what you learned. They learned what they needed to learn, be grateful for what they learned, and then just move on. It doesn't mean you guys won't come back together. It doesn't mean any of that. It just simply means in this moment, they don't serve you and you don't serve them. So just move forward. And then one other thing that's really important to understand is there's only one person with you for all eternity, just one person, and that's you. So when you do something that hurts you, you're having to deal with that for eternity. When you do something that hurts someone else, you only have to deal with that for this life and maybe a few others. But eternity is a really long time to hold a grudge with yourself. So my advice is to forgive yourself often until you don't need it anymore. Because the moment that you can forgive yourself is the moment you can move forward. And again, those extremes that cause all those challenging experiences, I've heard a lot of ascension symptoms that I'm like, wow, that would not be fun. Those experiences are because of lack of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Every time that you ever see an extreme, it's a moment to forgive.
Wow. Very clear. And I've never really had too much use for the word forgiveness because I've, in the way it's been used, but I like the way you're using it. It has a different context to it. And because it really is, about forgiving yourself and what that opens up, the space it opens up in you.
Yeah. We're all going to make mistakes. None of us are going to get it right the first time. If you love it enough, you're willing to keep going. And that's ascension for you in a nutshell. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Forgive yourself and move on. But if you give up, then yeah, you're not going to make it to the end of that ascended level and to the next level. There's infinite levels, for the record. For anyone out there that's playing this game, welcome to the infinite game.
Yeah. And I love too, most people talk about their past lives and so on, and talk about this whole state of being or consciousness that we're ultimately trying to get to. I love the fact that you put an ing on it because it never stops. It's infinite. But you also refer to the fact, and I hadn't heard this before, really, where you actually are proclaiming divinity in terms of the lives you have before you, not just where you came from. We are infinite, so this continues and goes on and on and on.
Absolutely, yeah. And the beauty of it is all of those lives are all happening right now. And people have talked about this a lot, so I won't talk about it very much. But what's important to understand about that is that you have enemies, lives that are past you that are outdated, and you have allies, lives that are ahead of you that are more powerful than you, right? But you are the observer. If you are right now consciously aware of this moment, paying attention, you're the observer life, which means that these are teaching you right now, and these are pulling you back right now. So you have an ability right now to pull these into you and to work through all the misunderstandings that they bring and only have allies from here on forward. Yeah. And the beauty of what I was talking about with renegotiation is almost everything here is renegotiating right now. And it's happening naturally, but it also can happen consciously. And for me personally, I like to walk through life instead of be dragged through life. There's some people that like to be dragged through life. That's okay. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just I personally don't like to be dragged through life.
That's Zen proverb, let go or be dragged.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you're going to get there. That's what fate does. It ties a rope to you. And you have the choice to be pulled by that rope, right? Or you can just be like, okay, cool. I'm going to walk, and I'm going to walk a little faster than the rope pulls so that I'm not going to get pulled by the rope. And getting pulled by the rope is those extremes that I was talking about. You don't want them. I call it waking up to an alarm. There's so many people that overslept and the alarm goes off. And if you've ever woken up to an alarm, it's very disconcerting. You're like, where am I? What's going on? Because it like shocks your system. You're not supposed to wake up like that. Well, when people spiritually awaken that wake up past their time, they get woken up in those intense ways. And like it takes months for them to balance all the extremes. Their entire life falls apart. All these things happen. But it's just because fate pulled them too hard. And we have a choice. We don't have to have that happen. So what I was saying with the renegotiation is if you take a moment and you just close your eyes and you allow your body and you to sync up, you'll start to feel all these little spots in your body, all these little density pockets, right? And if you just allow them to float off of you like little black balloons and just watch them dissolve in the light of God or the rainbow sun or whatever you want to do, you just let them go. You'll feel this lightness start to come up, this almost like cloud-like sensation inside your body. That's the freedom of the two of you working together. That's
Yeah.
the miracle that is possible when you get to that state. And this meditation is super easy. You just do it every day. It takes a few seconds. Just close your eyes, allow the black balloons to float off, and then all of a sudden you can open your eyes and you feel better. And it's
Yeah.
that process of renegotiation that's constantly happening all the way up till February 18th. So all we have to do is take a few seconds every day to do that. And I promise you, you won't get pulled by a rope. It's that simple. And all those past things that are pulling you by a rope this way, they go away too. So instead of tug of war with your soul, it's simply just, hey, here I am. I'm ready to play. And you'll have a greater life, a lot more fun, plus more opportunities, which is really helpful.
Yeah, another thing that comes to mind too, and the way you explain this is we also spend a lot of time talking about as we heal ourselves, we heal ancestral lineage,
Yes.
forward and back, but we never really think about the fact that we're also healing that lineage of our own essence, that one that you say is the only person that'll be with us through all these lives, right?
Yeah,
So that renegotiation you're speaking of is an alignment or whatever word we want to use, but it's affecting us, not just those outside of us. It's affecting us and all of our
absolutely.
multidimensionality. Yeah.
When we do work to change others, we miss the point. When we do work to change ourselves, we are the point.
Yeah.
And that to me has always been one of the most important things to my process is I'm not doing anything for others. When I write activations, when I write courses, I'm doing it for myself because I throw a dart into the future potential. I see where it lands and I go, okay, now how can I get there? And I begin writing technologies and courses and practices all the way to that point until I've reached where I want to go. And then I bring it into the physical plane and then I begin doing those things. And as I do those practices, since they've been written as steps along the way, I've imbued them with the power of the future. So it teaches me. It's this ally that moves me forward every day until all of a sudden I'm where that dart landed. And now I go, okay, where do I want to go next? And I throw the next dart and I continue that process. And like the course I'm in right now took me 3 years to write. But it didn't matter because during that 3 years, I was learning what I needed to learn. And I didn't give up on the world. I continued to do my daily life and continue to move forward, knowing that someday, if I didn't die, I would get to where I wanted to go. And 3 years is a long time, but the course is a year and a half long, so it'll be fun. By the time that I get done with this, I'll figure out something else to do if I'm still here. And that's the beauty of it is we make our own choices. We choose where we go. Fate helps us to get us to where we need to go as a spiritual being so that we can learn the lessons we need to learn, right? And those are just basically what you need to learn in all of your lives. So your fate, you can actually cross over, which is called a renegotiation as well, and it can happen naturally. But it can also happen because you spend more time than what you had agreed to spend on something. And so you out-level it. And that's a great way to renegotiate too. I don't know if you guys saw the little chart, but I actually posted it in the comments as well to make life easier for people from last video. But the chart is basically, it shows all these other cities that we didn't talk about. And the city, the first celestial city is where the extraterrestrials mostly come from. So like the angels, extraterrestrials, all those things come from there. Well, that's the city we're going home to when we die this life because all of the other stuff is gone now. And that's very big will when like that's like, wow, we just won the war for consciousness. Misunderstanding, confusion, chaos, all these things are no longer necessary and we don't have to play with them and they won't stop us from getting home. Like that's awesome, right? But then there were cities above that that help you to get closer to like the ascended master realm or the God realm eventually, right? And those things aren't going to be a renegotiation for about 6,000 years for a natural renegotiation. That doesn't mean that today you can't begin the process to move ahead of and to begin a pioneer and help the process of the earth to ascend faster. But again, you don't do it for the earth. You don't do it for the inhabitants of the earth. You do it because you want to, and it's going to help you get to where you want to go. And then when you get to a place where you're holding that space, yeah, you share how you get there if you want to. But the key is want to, right? So one other thing I want to go ahead and go over is I talked about this in the last video, but I did it really fast. So there's obligation, which is a third dimensional currency. There's trust, which is a fourth dimensional currency. And there's faith, which is a fifth dimensional currency, right? So the moment that you say, I need to blink or I have to blink, you have knocked yourself into a third dimension. You are going to lose whatever it is that's happening next. You're going to either come out of it with resentment, you're going to feel ashamed, upset, something's going to happen that's going to trigger an emotional response because you went to the third dimension before you went against something or for something in the fourth dimension, right? You could have been taking a test and you didn't even know it. But if we come out of autopilot and we allow ourselves to be in each moment, we'll start paying attention to these things. And those words are very powerful. If you are in obligation for anything, any action, any belief, it's not real. Let it go. If you trust something, that's a good step. You're moving towards it. But can you have faith in it? Can you not need to see something or have something reinforced to believe it? Can it just be completely just open to it? And having faith is a hard thing. Again, it's a fifth dimensional thing. It's something we just started getting. For the longest time, we trusted in things and we thought it was faith. But now we're finally pioneering what faith actually is.
Yeah, the transitive verb to trust and believe. I mean, it's and that's not the right one, but I mean, it's motion. That faith is that same motion you're talking about, moving through the fears. I mean, these are all, yeah. And the other thing too is, you're explaining like in linear, which is a way for the human to understand, but what you were also saying in terms of what's going to happen in say 6,000 years, and that doesn't have to stop any individual soul. Each time one of us expands a certain, or like you said, what did you say, level up even higher.
I call leveling up. I'm a video gamer. I love video games.
Yeah. So when we do that, we're opening energetic doors, and like you said in the beginning, and what you do, you don't have to say anything. It's the energy itself that speaks for itself, and we pick up on it like little transmitters, and people start throwing more darts.
Yep. And every one of those darts changes the world as long as it's thrown for you. If you throw it for the world, you miss the point, like I said, and you don't have the impact that you would have had. When we do things authentically, we change the world. Doesn't matter what it is. What I tell my students when they first start out is whatever the universe has given you as an opportunity, master it. I don't care what it is. You could be a street sweeper, and I'm proud of you as long as you master it. Because the moment you master street sweeping, someone's going to come along and be like, wow, you are really doing that. Here's another opportunity. And they give you another job, right? So then you take that job on and you master it. But as long as you do that, you're mastering a part of everything. Because no matter what it is in life, we can master it. Anything.
Corrine Madsen asked the question when you were talking in regard to where we go from here. How do you stop the feeling of homesickness for that home?
By acknowledging that you're already there and as a version of you, and finding that version of you outside of time and communing with it. It allows us to have this feeling of we're home, but at the same time, we're learning to be home. And that challenge that comes with the mind is that it's impossible to be there. But that challenge that comes with the heart, that space of the infinite, is that we already are there. So what I would say is turn the mind off just for a moment and feel. Because if you feel the energy of the world, not watch the videos, not listen to like all these other things, but feel the energy of the world, you'll know that you're home.
Yeah. And I guess another way to say that, because again, we're having to deal with the linear explanations, is, or correct me if I'm wrong, but another way you could say it is to interface with that future aspect, right?
Yeah.
That you said outside of space and time, which is really where that exists. Morgan talks about that when she talks about maybe getting through something is to align with your future self that's already been there and done that.
That's called allies right there. You just explained allies from her perspective.
Yeah.
The beauty of life is that it's infinite. If you can wake up enough to see that it's an infinite game, then you've begun the real journey. Until then, everything else has more value than you. And wow, I still have some time, so I guess I'll go over this. I was planning on doing this later on if I came back on, but I guess I'll go over it today. Works out for me. So there's a process to getting out of that space. You feel homesickness, and you feel homesickness because these three things aren't met. And these three things are the most important things that you can do. The first one is health, because if your character dies in this game right now, that's it for you. There is no continues in this particular timeline, right? Like you will be in another one. So health is the most important thing. When you're healthy, you naturally move into the next most important thing, which is happiness, right? So health and happiness have to both be there. for you to begin to practice something. And the third one is practice. So you have health, happiness, and practice. Now, the reason this is important to understand is being healthy is a question. Am I healthy? Okay, the answer is no. Well, what would make me healthy? And then you can figure out what that is. And maybe you spend the whole day just getting healthy. That's okay. Eventually, you're going to be like, am I healthy? And your body's going to be like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. Am I happy? And the answer might be no, and that's fine too. So you'll spend the day learning how to be happy. And the next day you wake up, you might find out that you're healthy and happy. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Now what can I practice daily to keep these in place and also to enhance them? And daily practice is the strongest, most powerful way that you can live your life. Some form of daily practice, but you have to commit to it in the future to create the ally. So my coursework is designed on a 7-day principle. Every week you do the same things to prove that you will do those same things to your body. And your body says, okay, you know what? I trust you. You did these things. You agreed to them and you followed through with them. Awesome. So then it begins to get stronger. It becomes healthier, becomes happier. You have the practices in place. So now all of a sudden your world becomes accepted. So now you're in this place of acceptance and you're like, whoa, okay. And then things will challenge that acceptance. They will say, well, what about this fire in California? And you're like, well, I mean, it's hard to say that that's a good thing. I don't know where, and all that misunderstanding comes up, right? And then you're like, okay, cool. If I wanted to accept these fires in California as what they need to be, because they're in action, which means they need to happen for whatever reason, then how do I learn to accept that? And what would it look like to accept that? So then you begin to explore that acceptance, and then all of a sudden you finally accept it and say, oh, okay, I can accept that these have a need. I don't know what it is, but I can accept it. And then all of a sudden, the next thing that happens is understanding, right? Because you're like, oh, and all of a sudden, now that you've accepted, you can pay attention. You're not trying to put your viewpoints and all these other things on it. And all of a sudden, it becomes an accepted and understood thing. You go, oh, I understand this is happening because this. And then you're able to start adding changes, right? Because now you're like, okay, I have accepted this thing for what it is. I understand why it is what it is. And now I can see what I could do to change it. Because I'm not trying to change it because I don't want it. I'm changing it because I've mastered it. When you accept and understand something truly, you've mastered it. So now it's time for you to change whatever it is you want to change in that thing that you have mastered. And that's how you live life. And as you continuously do that, you begin to change the world.
Yeah, that's the real deal there. Perfect timing too. Great message. Great broadcast. I want to say too to everybody that I visited Activation Station, which is a website that Jason and his students and colleagues and peers put together. And it's an amazing, unique website. I think it's also a 5D plus, what we're going to be seeing out here more and more and more in many different ways. But it's a great, as you can tell at first glance, that there's been a lot of years put into it. It speaks for itself. It has few words. It's frequency and vibration, and it's real. So you might want to check that out, and also check out his page.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And love to have you back again. I love these discussions because they're quick and to the point. We go right through it and see if we can move you to something you were going to talk about the next time, which puts you in a situation where you got to come up with something for the following time.
I don't ever have to come up with anything. That's the beauty of being here.
Yeah.
Just whenever you show up, right? Like the answer's there. You just have to follow through with it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, man, I appreciate it. I really do. I know everybody else does. We had 400 original views on the first show we did together, and there's about 4,600 now. It's all been organic growth, and I think this one will do the same. So this show resonates. Please spread the soul, spread the replay, spread the page and website that involved Jason, and please, if you would, put them in the comments again so everybody can get to you.
Okay. Thank you so
Kendra
much
already did it.
for having me on. And just remember, guys, the most important thing is to go out into the world and to learn by living. Let go of the tools as you're asked to let go of them, and continue to just grow as you need to grow. And if you can do those things, you're going to have a great life. The world behind the scenes is doing lots of things, I promise you. All you have to do is get in alignment with yourself, and the rest takes care of itself. So have a blessed, beautiful, and amazingly awesome night, everyone. Thank you again for letting me be on this platform. And I love you, man.
I love you too, man. Boom. Mic drop. See y'all later. Thanks, Jason.
Bye.
I'll talk to you.